Beards, Books, and Bourbon is a spoiler-rich environment. If you haven't read or listened to this book, then you should probably go ahead and do that, because we're going to talk about it, and we're going to say all the stuff that you don't want us to say. So go back and read it, or listen to it on audiobook, and then come back and listen to us. Thanks so much, and enjoy the show.
Welcome, everybody, back to Beards, Books, and Bourbon. I'm Steven.
And I'm Mark.
And we have a really exciting evening ahead of us tonight. This has been a long time in the planning. And by far and away, I think this is our guest who is located the furthest from our garage studio here in the Chicagoland area.
Is it furthest or farthest?
Furthest. It's either American English, British English, or Australian English. I'm not sure which one it is, but we'll have something of it.
I mean, no matter what, English is lazy in no other dialect you're talking about.
That's right. And while we are roasting at about 85 degrees Fahrenheit here in our Chicagoland area with little critters and bugs flying around our studio, our guest is in a nice, cool, what we figured out, 50-degree winter in Melbourne, Australia. Joining us from Melbourne, Australia is Cameron Sullivan, author of the magnificent The Red Winter.
Indeed.
And we are very excited to have you here with us all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Thank you for being with us, Cam.
Stephen and Mark, thank you so much. It's lovely to be on the show.
So we're going to go ahead and start. And for all of our listeners, because we are doing this on video from between Chicago and Melbourne, there is a little bit, you will notice a little bit of a delay probably between questions and answers and questions. So just bear with us. That will be just part of the process itself.
I might try to cut out some of the long pauses in the editing anyway.
Try to do a little editing. Our whiskey this evening is in honor of our guest and recommended by our guest, but also something that we did in one of our first seasons. But when we finally settled on the interview date, Cam recommended that we kind of revisit that, pick up a bottle of Starward again. So our bourbon this evening, or our whiskey this evening.
See how he just waves his hand at me like I'm the court jester or something? Come on, Mark. Dance like a monkey for us. Let's do it.
We got it.
So, our tradition has always been with these bottles is that we call it tonight's bourbon, right? And then we started this at the very beginning, and then we realized that there's a lot of beverages out there that don't necessarily meet the bourbon nomenclature. It doesn't meet that title. You know, it's whiskey, or it's rye, or it's something, or it's a single malt of some kind. But because it's tradition, I will continue to just slash the titles of every bottle that we talk about and say, tonight's bourbon is Starward Twofold Wheat and Single Malt Whiskey, aged in red wine barrels for 3 Melbourne years, made in Melbourne, Australia. And we'll talk more about that later.
We're definitely going to talk about the Melbourne year as well, because there's some interesting background on the Melbourne year versus any other spot in the world. So, Cam, once again, welcome. We are going to do our standard intro, so we'll throw it over to you. Welcome to the show. Give us a brief intro of who you are, where you are, and what brings you into the world of our podcast tonight.
Hi, I'm Cameron Sullivan. I'm the author, as mentioned, of The Red Winter, which is my debut novel. Background on me, I am obviously Australian, based in Melbourne. I grew up in Perth, which is on the west coast. Very, very beautiful, very quiet city, beautiful beaches. Very hot in summer, so I moved to Melbourne because it has these glorious winters over here. I was working when I was writing The Red Winter, it took me a very long time to write, close to 7 years. I was working as a copywriter, so I was writing to kind of support myself, and then working in sort of cafes on the weekend, and writing the book as a kind of passion project in between times. So the book is dark historical fantasy. It's kind of the intersection of all of my geeky interests: the history, the mythology, the fantasy, and the horror. It's a retelling of the hunt for the beast of Gévaudan in pre-revolutionary France, so sort of 1760s, 1780s. And it follows the story of Dr. Sebastian Grave, Professor Sebastian Grave, who's an immortal monster hunter on the hunt for the beast at that time.
And I was going to mention this a little bit earlier, but we'll throw that in now. It is in my day job, you mentioned that you were doing copy editing while you were writing the novel. In my day job, I am a French teacher of French literature and French history, and for most of my career, for about 20 years, I was a college professor, and then recently, about the past 9 years, I've been in a local high school. When a friend of mine at the time, the university I had worked at eliminated the program that I was part of, and then I found myself searching for a job, and a friend of mine brought me over to the local high school to help build the program. And in fact, we discussed the Beasts of the Gévaudan in some of the units that we do on the fantastical history in France and things around the revolution, pre-revolution, post-revolution, all that kind of stuff. So this was delightful to me because there is so much richness in here that connects with me just as a teacher and a consumer of French for all of my life, for all of my career, that I really, really, really enjoyed this. So I'm hoping that we touch a little bit more on the beasts themselves as we go. But our first question to you is, if you have a little bit of you mentioned it briefly, the history, the intersection of your geekiness, your interest in history, the Beasts of the Gévaudan in the pre-revolutionary period in France. If you're gonna give like an elevator pitch of this novel, what kind of ride are the readers in for, from your perspective as the creator of this book?
I'm so sorry, I lost the end of your question.
No worries. Yeah, no worries. What would be if you had to give an elevator pitch to a prospective reader for your novel? Where would you start? What would you tell them would be the ride that they're in for when they're engaging in this book?
Oh, I always start top line. I just say it's a dark fantasy retelling of the hunt for the Beast of Gévaudan, because I think that's really the heart of the what that happens. And the rest, it's obviously quite a complex, there are 3 storylines. It's quite a complex story, but that's definitely the top line. At its heart, it's a fun, dark, historical, but not in a kind of really bookish sort of scholarly way, though it is written that way. A dark fantasy retelling of a really interesting historical event, which is the hunt for the Beast of Gévaudan.
So I will ask a shorter and more direct question, just because I'm curious. Would you consider this book to kind of fall into the sphere of the grimdark genre?
I wouldn't, just because I think a hallmark of grimdark fantasy is that there are no real heroes. Nobody really has it. There's a lot of people's motivations are very dark a lot of the time, and while that is the case, I think a lot of my characters are there is still love, there is still goodness, there is still good intentions at the heart of what happens. So I wouldn't call it grimdark, just because I think even if there aren't real sort of heroic heroes, there are people trying to do heroic things. Sure. I think is an important distinguishing point. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And the grimdark novels that I have read tend to be a little bit more on the lighter side of that particular subgenre. And what I've noticed in those is that you can have truly despicable characters who are scary and edgy and disgusting in some ways, but then the dialogue that they say, everybody's really clever and vibrant and sometimes funny, the way that some of those things lay out. And your book kind of reminded me of that a little bit. You several different many of the supporting characters have some type of a supernatural origin or nature to them, and they have some really witty, clever, hysterical things to say throughout the book.
Yeah, the humor, I needed as I was writing it, I think just because a lot of what happens is so dark. It's the historical period, very dark, very violent. Just before the revolution, a lot of people living in really terrible circumstances. And then obviously monsters and mythology and sort of really dark religion. These elements are all quite horrific to live through, I think, as a person or as a character. And that kind of gallows humor, I think, really carried me through in terms of writing it and enjoying writing it. And it's also, I think, the humor and the horror kind of play off each other quite well. So one's kind of the light that casts the shadow, so they kind of play off, they bounce off each other in a way that's makes both of them more effective, I guess, in emotional impact terms.
I would,
a lot of the characters being quite dark and still having this.
No, go ahead. You cut out for a second there. Keep going.
I'm sorry. I was just saying in terms of the characters have been quite dark and having not always the best intentions, but always being quite, witty and having something a little bit wry or funny to say. I think particularly with a character like Sebastian, the protagonist, people who are funny are often hiding something behind the humor. There's pain, or there's it keeps people at arm's length in a certain way, and I think that really added a really cool dimension to his character and the other characters around him, because there's something that they're concealing that the humor is giving across anyway.
And we'll come back to Sebastian in a moment, and of course we'll also include his companion demon that was just super clever for me in the relationship building with the two. And I want to definitely hear from you as the author. But you had mentioned earlier on that it took you about 7 years to write this novel. And you also mentioned that you have a deep interest in the history and in this particular story that truly always remained a kind of a deep mystery as part of French history, right? Like there was never a true answer to what caused those particular deaths and those particular mutilations at that time. And world history, in fact, is peppered with that all over the place. I mean, you've got lore and folklore and creatures in every different culture, and you have particular mysteries in every different culture. You have unexplained events in every different culture. There are things that are left unexplained. I think about the story of the lions in I can't remember now. It was in either Central Africa or South Africa. There was the movie that was revolved around the two lions that came and attacked villages.
The Ghosts of the Darkness.
The Ghosts of the Darkness. Yes, yeah. Thank you. And there's things that
whose skins are in the Field Museum in Chicago.
Yes, they are. They are in Chicago. Yes, the skins are in Chicago. Yep. I forgot about that. And so during this process, I guess the question is, where did the nexus of the interest in the Beast de Givaudan begin for you? And what was that like for that 7-year period of actually crafting this novel for you because of that interest?
The interest I had, I think, was exactly that. It's a real life monster hunt, and I can think of very few examples. That the Ghost in the Darkness is another really good one in history of the what we, I guess, in sort of fantasy or sort of pop culture fantasy terms, think of as, a monster hunter going out to kill a dangerous beast or a dragon. And it happened in France, and there's heaps of documentation because there were so many, the king was involved, put a bounty on the beast, the church got involved, they were telling people to pray and making it this sort of adding a divine retribution element to the narrative as well. So there was a lot of just basic public notifications in terms of, stay safe out there. This is what we think it looks like based on eyewitness accounts. So a lot of those kind of wanted poster style newspaper articles. So really fascinating, like primary sources. And then there's also this propaganda element from the church sources where it's sort of almost playing up the possibility that it's a supernatural event that people have kind of either brought on themselves or that they need to be wary of. So that was incredibly interesting to read about. And writing the kind of fantasy version of that was not that difficult because a lot of it was already there. There was so much superstition, there was so much folklore about it at the time. And so reading about it, and then it was almost secondary to all of that research that I realized that it was the origin of a lot of our pop culture werewolf mythology as well. So that was a really fascinating little sidebar. And it obviously lent itself really well to that sort of narrative. And the whole thing just, once I was in it, and there was that really evocative kind of 1700s, the wigs and the fashion and the etiquette and the tension of the pre-revolutionary class system. Like, it's so interesting.
Yep.
That I think the beast just became this incredible, already this incredible metaphor of this dark, monstrous element of society that was ready to explode.
Did you have an opportunity to travel at all to the Gévaudan region of France?
Very, very briefly when I was a much younger man. I think I was about 20 when I was living in Europe. So I lived in Italy for a year and then in London for a couple of years. So I went and visited, not for this reason, but I went through the region and only came back to it, I think, I watched a movie called The Brotherhood of the Wolf. And
yes.
I was like, that's a really cool story. I was there. I think all of those elements, and I think most writers will say this, all those elements kind of were in orbit for a long time and then all aligned when I had, I think, the idea of this kind of immortal monster hunter tour guide through history. And that was the character that kind of lined all of those things up for me in Sebastian.
That is fascinating as well, just because I've lived in France on a number of occasions in my life, both as a younger man, as a kind of in my 20s, and then at various times throughout my academic career. And I've never had an opportunity. I've been to most places in France, or a good number of places in France, and I have not been to the Gévaudan region in France. And it's kind of on my bucket list of places to go. And reading your novel and listening to the novel, the audio version of it, is reigniting that desire to go and travel there at some point in my life. So I need to get back over there and see the actual location of this place.
Yeah. You and me both. I would love to go back. I did so much research. I feel like I kind of vicariously lived there for so long that I'd love to go back and see it. Provided the book's not incredibly offensive and I'll be chased out of town. But,
I don't think so.
I'd love to go back as well.
And the research now is so accessible. Some of those documents are so accessible nowadays in the digital world versus having to, 30, 40, 50 years ago, where travel for research was a very large type of expense, a large type of event. Now the accessibility for you to be able to research that and all the digital documentation and everything is a really bonus to this type of storytelling. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think a huge part that we take for granted now is the accessibility of translation. So I don't speak French at all, and which I hope doesn't come across in the book. But all of the documentation, so from the trial of Joan of Arc through to the newspaper clippings, all of those things in 1700s French, so not even contemporary French, immediately accessible, or 1400s French in the case of Joan of Arc. Very, very easy, very accessible, even in terms of accessing library collections on the other side of the world. Log in, creating like very, very easy, and everyone dying to help you. Just incredibly easy research process for me.
That is good, and even as a French scholar myself, with a long history of speaking French, the French of Jeanne d'Arc and the French of 1700s France would be largely inaccessible to me as well, are a little bit more difficult for me to access, even with my broad knowledge of the language. And so, just the storytelling in here was wonderful, and kudos to the narrator of the audiobook as well. I had the name over here, but what a brilliant audiobook narrator that was chosen for that.
Yeah, Rory Barnett does the
yes,
male voice,
Barnett,
and Imogen Church does the female sections, and they absolutely smashed it. Just a brilliant job. I when I came to the whole publishing experience very cold. I didn't even think about the fact that there might be an audiobook or different editions, an ebook, streaming, and none of this really had entered my mind. And so when they were talking about doing the audio version to me, and they pitched different people, I gave it a reasonable amount of thought, but I didn't appreciate how incredible and how difficult and how complex it would be, particularly with the footnotes and the accents and the character voices. They just absolutely killed it. It's an incredible skill.
Yeah, and overall, it was really enjoyable just to listen to it. I've got 3 kids and a full-time job, and so I haven't had the ability to sit down and actually read a book cover to cover in 15 years. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I find that when you're reading a book, it's an active sport. You have to hold it with 2 hands, and you have to keep it in front of your face, and you're really not doing anything else. Whereas with an audiobook, I can plug in my earbuds and I can go mow the lawn, I can do laundry, I can do the dishes, I can go for a walk, whatever it is I want to do, and I can multitask. So, and that's the only time that I can multitask. I'm terrible at it otherwise, but I can listen to a book and do something else at the same time.
And that's a lot of how we prep for this podcast, Cam. We listen to the books, we get a chance to be able to kind of jot notes down and everything. And then when we really come across the ones that we love, I always buy the hard copy to add to my library so that I have this in my library. So it is nice here in my hands. Like I said, I wish you were a little bit closer. I would have you scratch a little autograph on the inside of the book. But one of these days, perhaps if you're traveling here to the United States, we'll be able to join you for an in-person bourbon and show you around Chicago if you're ever in the area. That would be amazing.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So
absolutely. Next time I'm in Chicago, yes, please.
Let us know. So let's talk about Professor Sebastian Grave. Give us a sense of, he is a deep, complex, multifaceted, really fascinating is not the word that I want, because that seems very trite and dismissive of the depth of that character. He's so rich in the way in which we encountered him in the audiobook. And as I go through the print copy of it too, that same richness comes across as a character. How did he?
Well, and he's engaging as well.
And he's terribly engaging.
Very much so.
He is so engaging to us as the reader. How did he develop in you?
He's essentially, there is a little bit of wish fulfillment in the sense that if I were a character in history, that's who I would want to be. Some immortal monster hunter with a demon on my back. Yes, that's who I would choose. But in a really, I don't know how interesting this is, but he's in some way he's kind of the voice that I hear when I'm doing my research. So I'll read something in history, and the parts that I love the most in the research are where there's, sources disagree or eyewitness accounts differed or those kind of things.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that. So I'll chase that down a rabbit hole, usually some kind of conspiracy theory or superstitious nonsense or whatever. That kind of voice, that little bit of curiosity and, but what's the real story? That very much informs Sebastian's voice. He's a cynic. He is very interested in things, but always as an outsider. He's very, very wary of being part of the establishment, but he does like having power and nice things as well. So I guess the combination of those two things, like who would I want to be, like if we're going to do a fan of, and also that kind of scholar, I guess the again, like a tour guide through history. So the notes in the margins of the funny notes in the margins of what could potentially be seen as quite dry history or quite not uneventful, but quite pompous history in pre-revolutionary France. We've heard most people know the main beats, and he's interested in the what were the people like? I bet there's some gossip in that. I bet like what was this monster? So these things that I'm interested in, he kind of brings to life.
I like the way that, and it kind of goes back to something that you said. I like the way how the professor uses the structure of the court system as kind of a tool for him to get the things that he wants to get or to the places that he wants to be at. He's playing the game not necessarily because he likes the game. He's playing the game because he knows that he's good at it and he can usually win and get the things that he wants from it. At least that's how I took it.
Yeah, and I think that's yes, absolutely. Because he's immortal, he has that kind of the critical distance, you could say, to see that all of our systems and etiquette and power structures are kind of fleeting, and he's seen it all happen 100 times before, so he knows how to pull the right strings to get what he wants without necessarily facing the consequences, or so he thinks. Right. So yes, that's a huge part, and the fact that he's got Sarmadel, his sort of indwelling demon, on his shoulder, essentially encouraging him to give in to his worst impulses all the time, is that really it was an incredible amount of fun to write, and he, I think, probably pushes things a little bit further than he would otherwise because of that.
Oh, absolutely. I'm Stephen Samadel.
That's right.
That's who I am.
That's right. But both of our families thinks that we are incredibly nuts for doing this podcast. Anyway, so we just kind of play off of each other.
We'll sit down to a recording session, and Stephen will say, "Okay, I have to be in bed by midnight," and I'll say, "Sure, no problem." 2:30 in the morning. Yep. Well, maybe I should go home now, Stephen. You're supposed to be in bed by midnight, Well,
and I mean, right now it's 11 p.m. here on Tuesday evening, right? So we're behind you, obviously. And so by the time we're done talking to you and we, have a few tastes of some other bourbons we're looking at, it will be 2 or 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. And I'll be like, Mark, you got to leave. Sarmadel. So Sarmadel, I think first of all, I think what I love the most about that character, aside from the crafting of it as an ancient demon living inside and with a scholarly, centuries-old, occultist, physician, scholar, professor, monster hunter, is that every single time something came up, he's like, well, just kill him.
That's right.
Let's just kill him. Kill him.
Just kill it.
Right.
We'll bury the body right over there.
No, and because he didn't kill him, and Sebastian wouldn't do it. He wouldn't cave into the influence to kill him. And Sarmadel would be like, "Well, I told you so. You should have killed him when I told you to kill him." And I love that because it brings such a quirkiness to the idea of of an ancient demon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I hope you've learned a lesson from this, my love. Always listen to what I say.
Right.
Do what I tell you to do.
So, did that relationship exist in the early iterations of this idea for
I'm
you?
not so much.
And we have a little bit of a delay, so that's okay. Finish what you're saying, and then I'll ask the question again.
Yes, absolutely. That was so. I literally was just about to answer that exact question. That relationship between Sebastian and Samadel was so critical, I think, to the themes of the book. There's a lot of characters who are kind of hiding a dangerous self, and I loved that idea that Sebastian, who would outwardly appear to be very civilized and urbane and intelligent and polite and probably a bit of a snob, was hiding at all times this part of himself that's like, just kill them, eat their hearts, and that'll solve all of our problems. And not deliberately, I did not do it this way on purpose, but by the end of the book, I was kind of on Team Samadel. I was like, a lot of the time he was right. This would have been a much shorter book if they just followed his advice.
Right. That's right. 100%. 100%.
That I wanted that idea of that kind of devil on the shoulder, interiority. In terms, it's a really good way to get to know Sebastian apart from anything else. If he's able to have conversations with a part of him, a separate entity that lives inside his head.
Sure.
A really beautiful way of giving a kind of in the round feel to those introspective moments. And also, I think too, as we were saying with the humor, there's a really good. It's a really good way to short circuit what would otherwise be quite disturbing in what's happening in the scene. If it's a scene, Samadel quite enjoys that, so he's always got something to add. That adds a little bit of humor.
Yes,
nothing like a fun-loving demon.
We're actually 30 minutes in already. Can you believe that?
We are 30 minutes in, so Cam, at this point, we're gonna pause and do the whiskey tasting. So that's about the time in the show.
And then after that, I think we should talk about the succubus.
I think we should talk about the succubus afterwards, because anytime you got to have a succubus. Livia, I think, was the succubus, right?
Yes.
Yes. So we got to bring the succubus back. We got to talk about Antoine. We got to talk about Livia. We got to talk about the bishop,
right?
Who was a great and gregarious character in his own right. But let's taste the whiskey.
We have a lot of things to talk about, and probably not enough time to talk about it.
Well, and we also don't want to. This book came out in October, November of last year of 25. So we also want to continue to be respectful of not too many spoilers and maintain a little bit of readership out there. So.
Right.
So we're going to dive into the whiskey here. Mark is going to do a little spiel again on the whiskey, and then we'll taste it and share our comments.
That's right. Tonight's whiskey, see, I said whiskey, you're welcome, is Starward Twofold Wheat and Single Malt Whiskey, aged in red wine barrels for 3 Melbourne years, made in Melbourne, Australia. And then here on the back, it says, moving beyond tradition is exactly where Starward lives, from how it's made to how it's enjoyed. We tried something new, using barrels from famed Australian wineries in our backyard. We loved what we discovered and never looked back. Twofold, we have some of the hardest working barrels in the world. Melbourne's constantly changing weather helps our whiskey mature and taste well beyond its years. A blend of wheat and single malt whiskey folded together and matured in Australian red wine barrels, delivering a balance of juicy red fruit, oak spice, and sweet vanilla characters. It's equally luscious as a sipper, on ice, or in a cocktail.
So here we go. We're going to raise our glass to you, Cameron Sullivan, and thank you for sharing your book with the world.
Likewise.
And with us. And thank you for recommending that we revisit Starward.
Yeah,
So
yeah, absolutely.
this is a lovely way to honor a whiskey from Australia.
Yep.
Cheers.
Cheers.
My pleasure. And yeah.
You know, it's funny because I'm almost positive that we had this in the first season, because back in the first season we had no idea what we were drinking.
Nope. Let's share with Cam how we. So the nexus of our podcast really occurred. So Mark and I met about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
We both have 3 kids. We both love reading. We both love bourbon, and we would sit in your backyard or my front yard and just talk. And then COVID hit, and we're like, well, we are both in our families were kind of in the in the pods of your neighborhood right during that time. And we were able to get together, and we thought, well, what the heck? Let's see if anybody will listen to us, and let's start a podcast. So that was the birth of Beards, Books, and Bourbon was in 2020.
We thought that we were funny. We wondered if anybody else would think we were funny.
Some people do. Yeah,
a few.
Yeah, a few out there.
Some folks.
But our initial, if you go back and listen,
I think you're funny.
Thank you.
We got one
Thank
vote.
you.
We got one vote. Our wives do not think that we're funny at all, so we lost them a long time ago. But we if you go back and listen to, if you in your busy life, if you listen to season 1 at all or any of the episodes, our comments about bourbon were that, well, this bourbon
tastes so bourbony,
right? And that's the extent to what we did.
I've never had a bourbon that tasted so much like bourbon.
Yeah, and that was the extent. And so, but over 6 years now, and lots of downloads later, we enjoy our collection. Is, I don't want to move the computer for fear of breaking something, but our collection spans much of our garage studio here, with a little over 200 bottles of bourbon that we have had on the show.
Yeah,
which is good, which is fun. This I remember. So this is lovely. This is a sweet whiskey. It's got that single malt flavor to it.
Well, I like the fact there is a certain amount of debate about what's called tasting notes.
Yeah.
That sometimes get printed on the labels of the bottles,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It tells you that, like this one, it says juicy red fruit, oak spice, and sweet vanilla characters. And some people really appreciate that because it kind of gives them a guide of what they should be trying to look for when they're tasting it. Other people don't like it at all because the truth of the matter is that the palate is a very subjective thing. And so, for instance, for me, I don't drink wine. So when they tell me that it's aged in red wine barrels, that's not necessarily going to evoke an image for me. But you say something like juicy red fruit, and I take a sniff of this, and I smell something like a plum or a cherry right off the bat.
Yep.
Yeah, and I like that. I really like that oak spice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
And I do like the oakiness of it as well. I really do. I really do. And you're getting what's different here, obviously, is it's a single malt whiskey. So you're getting a little bit of that peat flavor.
Yeah.
That you get with some of the traditional whiskeys, like you get from a Scottish whiskey or an Irish whiskey.
Right.
Which is going to be a little bit different. You got bugs flying around in here.
They're all over the place.
And a little bit different than the oakiness or the wood flavor that you get from the barrel aged bourbons that are typical of Kentucky or Tennessee or those places, stuff like that.
Yeah, malted barley has a very distinct flavor.
Yeah.
It brings a certain amount of sweetness to the palate, but if it's too much, it can almost taste like bad pancake batter.
Yeah.
But when it's done just right, that's where you get like that kind of Scotch flavor, that peaty Scotch kind of flavor. It all comes from the single malt. And so for Starward, when they make Twofold, when they're mixing their whiskey, a wheated whiskey, which also has a different kind of sweetness to it, along with the malted barley together, that single malt together, that produces again that oak spice, that red fruit flavor, caramel and vanilla are something that's very much standard that you taste in sweeter whiskeys or in bourbons. And this gives you kind of all of it all together, and it's very well balanced as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's really nice. Are you close to the distillery in I mean, I know Melbourne is a very large city, but are you familiar with where it's located in your area?
I believe it's in South Melbourne, so Port Melbourne. So I mean, not very close, but I could get there quite easily. And thank you to Melbourne's wonderful public transport system.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
And I'm very much at the bourbon tastes like bourbon stage of appreciation. But I love this. I like that it's a little bit sweet and vanilla-y. I'm having it obviously on ice. That's not all whiskey I'm drinking in the daytime. But it's delicious. I really, really enjoy and Starward do a lot of different varieties.
So something that we have noticed in our years of tasting is that you can take a whiskey or a bourbon or a rye and you try it neat and it tastes one way, and then you go back to it and you try some of it with a few drops of water or an ice cube, and it can completely change the flavor.
Yeah, quite a bit.
And so it's not that it becomes bad, it's not like it's not pleasurable, but it does kind of, oftentimes it kind of inverts the flavor. So if you're drinking a sweet whiskey and you put a little bit of water in it, all of a sudden you're getting smoke and spice, and the sweetness is kind of muted or down towards the bottom of the glass. It's apparently it is an actual chemical reaction that takes place by the addition of the water.
That's fascinating. I usually drink mine on ice, so maybe I should try it the other way, just to get the full experience.
Just to get the different,
just like a little pour of it neat, and just try a sip of that and see if you can compare it with what the ice tastes like. I think you'll find that with most of the whiskeys that are out there, you'll find that it changes flavor on you. The big mass market ones like here, like Jack Daniel's, Straight Jim Beam, Knob Creek, Buffalo Trace, they're making their product in very large batches, and they want a very specific kind of flavor. And so they figured out the chemistry to engineer it so that whether you put ice in it or not, it always tastes like Knob Creek. It always tastes like Jack Daniel's.
Yep.
But where you find that the flavor changes a lot is with the distilleries and the labels that are a little bit smaller than those. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited about Starward, because at first I thought, oh gosh, there's so many different kinds of Starwards out there. I'm sure that we can go pick up a bottle.
No.
And then I go to the liquor store, it's like, oh yeah, tariffs.
This is the only one.
Forgot about that.
This is the only one we can find. So at some point,
I'm sorry. That's on you guys. I can't take any responsibility for that.
Us. Not on us. I can tell you that right now. We are not in that ilk. So true. I can put that one straight out there. So we're gonna try to get rid of that dude anytime soon.
We'll leave it at it's America's fault.
Yeah. It's somebody's fault. I don't know who, but we could use a Sarmandel right now. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Look, if you had just done what I told you to do before,
yeah, we'd be all right. Yeah,
it would be fine.
Well, I mean, in terms of like pre-revolutionary vibes, I don't want to sort of get involved in that discussion.
Right.
And so I think this is the only bottle that we can find here currently.
Yeah.
And somehow, some way, I'd love to get my hands on a couple of the other varietals. So you'll have to let us know if there's an easy way for us to do that at some point. At the end of the show, or later on, I'd like you to send me your address too at some point, because we do want to send you, we do have a shop. We have our Glencairn glasses that we'd like to send you as a little author gift. And I want to know what the easiest way to get that to you is. If I should just mail it directly, or if it's easier to get through your publisher or through your US editor or anything like that. I'm not sure, but think on that for a minute. and we can figure out what the best way to do that is, because we want to send you a little gift for being on the show and add to your glass collection when you enjoy your Starward whiskey. So, but this is a delightful pour. This really is.
And
yeah, this is a delightful pour.
I am very happy with it. Also at 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm very.
I think there's nothing wrong. It's afternoon, so tell us real quick for our listeners, some who might not be familiar. What is a Melbourne year? When they talk about that, this is a 3 Melbourne years. In the whiskey aging process. Do you know?
No, I think that's I think that's just them establishing the fact that we're in the southern hemisphere. So it's a Melbourne year as opposed to a northern hemisphere. I'm trying to think what the comparable climate would be. We're very
you've got some climate changes
here, I think.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's where it starts and finishes. There's no such thing as a Melbourne year.
I love that. We assume too that it is climate related.
Exposing my ignorance.
Yeah. Well, it's like here in the States, one of the things that makes Kentucky bourbon in high demand, the reason why people like it so much is because Kentucky's kind of situated from a climate standpoint right in the middle, where they kind of like Chicago does. They have really low winters, they have really hot summers, plus also Kentucky is riddled with limestone caves and underground streams and lakes and whatnot, and so the water adds to that effect as well. So you have the high temperature changes, because what that does is that causes the wood in the barrel to swell and contract. And so when it swells, it's drawing the liquid into the wood. And then when it contracts, it squeezes it all back out into the center of the barrel. And that's where you get all those wood tannins, so that you actually get the flavor of what the whiskey would taste like or what the bourbon tastes like. It comes from the wood more than anything else.
Yep.
And then the kind of water that you're using adds to that also.
Okay, that does make more sense then, because as I think on those notes you were reading, it talked about the variable Melbourne weather.
Yeah.
And Melbourne is, in Australia at least, famous for being very variable. 4 seasons in one day is kind of the weather description most people hear about Melbourne. And it's very true. Like it's crazy changeable. And we're right in the middle of a bay as well. So we've got all of the opposing weather systems coming from the south, from inland, we do get a lot of change of weather. I have learned something that's very, very interesting.
Us too, with Starward, we have learned a little bit more about the impact of the Melbourne climate systems on the aging process for the whiskey.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
Well, and I could dive into climate change talk about the whiskey industry and the wine industry, because I've done a lot of research on it. One of the things that they're predicting for us in the United States right now is that, right now a vast majority of wines that are grown in the far west of the United States, either in California or in Oregon, but now even down into, to a certain extent, in New Mexico and even Arizona. But with climate change happening the way it's happening, now they're predicting that in the next 25 to 30 years, Wisconsin will have the perfect climate for growing wine grapes. And Wisconsin it's on the border with Canada. It's way up there.
Yeah. So you never know. We might
if we're looking for silver linings, I guess that
somehow.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect, climate change is a perfect segue into the succubus.
Yeah.
So, let's
Nothing
talk a little.
changes your personal climate like a succubus.
A succubus. Let's talk about Livia, or let's let you talk a little bit about Livia. Give us an author's perspective of Livia, and we can kind of combine this too into Livia, and then kind of move into Antoine and his father, who was it Jacques? Jacques was the father, right?
I think so. Yeah,
I think so.
I think it was Jacques.
Am I right?
Other way around, but yes.
Other way around.
Yeah. Oh, Jacques was the son. Antoine was the father. That's right. And talk about Livia. Let's talk about the succubus. Everybody needs a succubus in their life.
So I chose Olivia, and I agree. Um, but I people like a lot of people, just the response that I've had so far, she's either their absolute favorite character or they hate her from the get-go, and she's just irredeemably not it. Um,
Fascinating.
so I chose her, I think. Well, yeah. I chose her as a companion for Sebastian, I think, in the real world, um, because he's such a psychologically and emotionally such a prickly character. Um, he couldn't just and he's immortal as well, so he needed kind of an immortal companion who was his match in a lot of ways, but
Yeah.
who um, the relationship is very toxic in the sense that she can't leave because he's contracted her services for an indeterminate amount of time.
Right.
And she also can't, there's, I guess, the succubus, in terms of the archetype of a succubus, is a manifestation of desire. So it's the state of constantly wanting something or wanting something incredibly passionately. And the thing with desire is that once you get that thing, it dies. So there's a real, they have to remain in that state of always kind of orbiting around each other, wanting to get closer, but never quite reaching the point where they can be sort of, I guess, consummated in that sense, partly because that would probably kill him. But I also wanted to play with the idea of the succubus as a there has always been as particularly in fantasy the idea of the kind of super sexual femme fatale character who uses her sexuality as a weapon, the kind of Black Widow archetypal Black Widow character, and I feel that a lot of that caters to the kind of the men writing those stories a lot of the time, straight men. And you know, she's got a heart of gold, and like underneath it all, she just wants to be loved and all those things. And that was never the case in the source material and the mythology. They're forces of destruction, and they're cautionary tales. They're manifestations of really deep, dark parts of our psyche, the destructive nature of desire and kind of lust and that love that needs to possess and consume. And so I wanted her to be that. Like, she's an absolute sociopath. Like, she's fun, but she's not, you wouldn't want to date her. Like, she's certainly not supposed to be a sympathetic love interest. She just kind of took on a life of her own. I know that sounds, I hate it when authors say that because obviously I made her up. But she was all of the things that she's a very sober, cynical look at the historical context in her sections. The sexualization of the power dynamics between men and women in the history, she finds incredibly boring, and she's seen hundreds and thousands of years of human sexuality and human desire and human lust, because that's what she's interested in. And her perspective on those things, again, as a bit of an outsider, was really interesting to write. I think it's very tempting to put our current ideas around gender and people being downtrodden by class systems and sexual politics and those kind of things. It's very tempting to project those onto the past. And to me, Livy is a bit of an antidote to that. She kind of just went, it was ridiculous. It's always been ridiculous. It's still ridiculous now. And she's constantly, again, doing the worst possible thing and dealing with the consequences. And that's what, as a writer and as a reader, I'm sure that's what you want, a character who's just a loose cannon, breaking every taboo. I really enjoyed her much. She was not intended to be a huge part of the story at all. And now people say she's their favorite character. So I guess I made my own bed in that case.
Yeah, I think you did that to yourself, Cam. I love the character.
Oh, yeah.
I love the fact that she has her own chapters or her own sections at the very least. I love the juxtaposition of her point of view on things as opposed to Sebastian's point of view on things. She's all the things that you've said, but I love how she is. Again, she's clever and she's intelligent and she's insightful, while at the same time also being a complete sociopath about stuff.
Yep.
It's like, I just really want to be loved, but I'll probably kill you if we do that. You know, and like you said, it creates that tension. And that's what readers love. They love to have that tension with maybe the hint of resolution, but then you pull back and it doesn't happen, and you let the teasing continue, right? I think that she's a great character.
Yeah, and I think the being able to have a character like that who will. There's always, I think, there's a tendency, particularly in kind of anti-hero narratives or kind of a lot of our, especially superhero stuff. There's always the idea that those dark impulses exist, but you know we're good people because we don't give in to those dark impulses. Livia does not care about that. She's absolutely going to give into it. And if she can get away with it, she will. If she won't, she's happy to take the punishment because that's, you know, in terms of who she is and what she represents, that's exactly what she would do. So I'm a little bit scared of having to write more of her, which I am currently doing, just because she is just absolute chaos in a story to write.
I love the severed hand, how it points in different directions.
Yeah, I do too. That is good. Speaking of those deep love relationships, let's transition over to Antoine, right? So Antoine and Sebastian have a very deep relationship, a very deep love, a very emotional, sexual, complicated, and lingering history together, right? I mean, it has gone on for a while. It is coming back in this whole entire, part of the story. Where does that live in the relationships that you built? The story itself, Red Winter, for me is just it's a beautiful web of relationships, right? And that's how it resonated with me, right? That's how it resonated with me as a reader. I mean, it also resonated with me as the interest in the French historical context.
Oh my God, I couldn't get him to shut up about it.
Right. I'm getting a new co-host next week, so
good night, everybody.
Yeah. But also just the relationships between all of the characters, and obviously most authors, I would imagine, try to achieve that kind of relationship building. But this one was really, really resonated with me as a reader. Can you speak to Antoine a little bit?
Yeah, so that I always wanted it to be a love story. I think that was a really important motivational factor for Sebastian in terms of he lives forever. What are the things that he's going to remember? What are the important stories in his long history? And they're the love stories, I think. But Antoine, I guess it is a love story, and it's incredibly passionate, and they live through this very dangerous, exciting hunt for the beast. It's a kind of whirlwind, forbidden. It's a terrible idea. Sebastian knows from the get-go that it's, he's hundreds, if not thousands of years old, and Antoine is the son of the local baron, who's obviously a lot younger than him. So it's a bad idea, but Sebastian does it anyway. He gets caught up in this incredible love affair, and then 20 years later, kind of has to deal with the consequences of having done that, and having also kind of introduced Antoine to a supernatural world that he's not ready for, and really consumes him in ways that Sebastian could have prevented if he was a little bit smarter about it.
Right, and would not have known,
And Yes, and I think that what you say about it being a web of relationships, I love that because I think the main love story in the book and in Sebastian's life is with Sarmadel. So that's the love that he knows will always be there, no matter how many people around him die, no matter what happens with his personal life elsewhere. Sarmadel's always every day going to be there in his head, and they do have, I think, a very different sort of love. It's certainly not a marriage that I would recommend.
No.
But it's when Sebastian's, yeah, well, I mean, I won't speak for anyone else. When Sebastian's sort of thinking about his relationship with Antoine 20 years later, or I think the greatest theme would be regret, in the sense that he knows that when he gets entangled with a mortal lover, that it's always going to end badly, and he feels responsible for that. Whereas Sarmadel, he's got no choice, and they're always going to be together. So I think in terms of the greater love story, Sarmadel, and to a lesser extent Livia, because they're always there, and Sebastian knows that they're there forever.
Well, and I think that's fascinating, and I think one of the things that you do as the crafter of this story is make that distinction between a mortal love and an immortal love. You know, Antoine not only is mortal, but is restricted by the conventions of his station in life, right? I mean, he's constricted by the French nobility. He's constricted by the quote unquote properness of how they were supposed to be in the world around them at that time, and the conventions thereof, right? And for Sarmadel and for Livia, we were talking about the difference. Mark grabbed some ice for us for the whiskey, just to try a little bit of the change. Yeah.
The opportunity.
And
oh yeah, what are your thoughts with the ice?
Yeah. What are the thoughts with the ice?
Well, the nose changes.
The nose changes.
I'm going to try some without, just to reverse.
The nose changes right. The nose changes right away. Right away. You'll be feeling good for the rest of the afternoon.
Oh yes, very different. Much less sweet.
Without. I was just going to say, Cam, the ice for me has increased the cherry flavor, the plum flavor, the red fruit flavor kind of things. Yep. And mind you, it's not like a grape or a peach. This is a plum cherry, kind of nectarine kind of taste that I get in here.
Yeah, a darker fruit, a stone fruit, something like that.
Stone fruit.
Lovely. I get a lot more smoke and spice on the nose, but in the taste, on the palate, I mean, it's sweeter right on the front of the tongue, but on the back of the tongue, it's very crisp. It's very clean. Like, it doesn't linger there. It's once I've swallowed, then it's gone.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I like that both ways.
A lot, without the ice, to me, yeah, it feels much. Tastes a lot. That the spice elements and the oak are much stronger to taste, rather than on the nose. I think, but again, I'm getting to the point where I'm just like, it tastes like whiskey. That's
there are a lot of people who, and we've done this a little bit. The ice that we have is just simply the ice that is from our water, which is Lake Michigan water here in Chicago, and
heavily filtered
Lake Michigan water. But there are some tasters out there, and we've learned this in our research, that will, instead of putting ice into the bourbon, will come with a dropper of any variation of distilled water. It could be a San Pellegrino, it could be an Evian from France, it could be any type of distilled water, and they'll take a couple drops and drop it in to the bourbon and see how that reacts with the bourbon, versus just a standard piece of freshwater ice.
And sometimes they'll do mineral water
mineral water, some mineral waters as well, and they'll drop that in there and see what that does. It's fascinating. Yeah.
So, I had no idea that the distilling industry has a fairly high demand for chemists.
Yes.
organic chemists to help them come up with new flavors for their beverages.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense because it's, I mean, far more technical than I'm probably giving it credit for. But it's, I guess it's that, like any of these things with wine, they say it's kind of the intersection of sort of art and science. So it's to produce something that's technically beautiful, you need to have all of those elements, much like writing a book,
Right.
I suppose.
Much. And we were talking while Mark was away getting the ice. We were talking about we had shifted over to Antoine, and Cam was sharing his author's perspective of the love story between Antoine and Sebastian versus Sarmadel and Sebastian. The difference between mortal love and immortal love, and how Antoine is constrained by his mortality, and the regret of the love that could happen there between him and Sebastian versus Sarmadel and Lydia to an extension there, of being always there as the love that whatever that love
Could be but
like.
must not be.
Right. For Sebastian. And that's fascinating, Cam, because the scenes with Antoine and Sebastian are deeply emotional and vivid in the way that you write them.
Yeah.
From immortal emotional love, the love that we feel for the people that we are attached to in our lives, emotionally, sexually, physically, politically, whatever all of those lees are in our world, and equally with Sarmadel, equally passionately and vividly written in the way that relationship exists. That really truly is a masterful part of this book. It really is. It really gives pause for us to consider how we deal with our relationships, in life, and who we deal with in our lives, right?
Well, and I think that when I was writing those things, it's quite exposing in the sense that it's showing the world what I think love looks like, or what I imagine that sort of love with an immortal entity would be like. And different as a gay man as well. There's a different the historical context changes everything about that as well. Antoine was never going to live with Sebastian as a couple. That was unthinkable. It just wouldn't have happened at the time. They would have both got married and then done whatever they wanted in the shadows in the meantime. And those things, I think, that and the humor were the two things that I struggled with the most, in the sense that I felt very vulnerable to write about them in such a raw way. And it's certainly not, for people who haven't read the book, it's certainly not a spicy book. I wouldn't classify it as a romance, capital R romance, kind of in terms of genre. But the love story is really complex for all of those reasons. Like, Sebastian's obviously not your standard, he's immortal. He's not your standard protagonist falling in love with someone and the story is about their relationship. There's always a greater story for him, and he needs to deal with the consequences of initiating, a much younger lover into his incredibly dangerous, incredibly, a lot of very bad consequences in the world that he inhabits. And I think he feels guilt, he feels very selfish, he feels regret. All of those things make it a very bittersweet love story. And then on the flip side of that, you've got, as we were discussing, the Sarmadel element, who regrets nothing, asks the most dreadful things of Sebastian, but judges him for none of it. So there's that kind of unconditional love, which is awful and never ending. And then you've got on the flip side, you've got the mortal love, which is full of complications, very fleeting, but somehow a little bit more heartfelt. There's Sebastian really leaves a part of himself behind when Antoine dies.
I feel like the relationship between Sebastian and Antoine, we kind of know going in, they're doomed from the beginning, right? And even though they're doomed from the beginning, and you know that it's not going to work out, there's no way that it can work out. We still see these kind of these golden moments where everything is simple and it's right, and those complications fall away, or at least they retreat into the background. And all of it happens during the hunt for a monster. But there are these quiet, intimate, very exposing, revealing kind of moments that really shows the humanity of the love that they share.
Yeah, that was such a big part of it. I think we seem to, I mean, and I think just because of the way the world is at the moment, we seem to assume that we make our most important and best decisions and form our best relationships when we're happy and content and secure and safe. And really the opposite's true. What really gets our emotions kind of firing is danger and risk, and the real thought of being on that precipice of making a choice with terrible consequences with somebody. So those are real bonding experiences in life generally, but romantically particularly. They really, really get us involved with another person in a deep way. So all of those, every situation that Antoine and Sebastian are in, that is described in the book generally, is either full of danger, full of passion, like their love. They're all very highly charged emotional moments. And I think so that's what's Sebastian loved about their relationship. But that's also the weakness in their relationship, and what ultimately kills it. Sebastian's, again, introduced him into this exciting, dangerous, magical world that isn't sustainable for someone who's not going to live for 1,000 years. And that, I think, is why their love story, as you were saying, was inevitably going to be tragic.
Well, and I think too that Sebastian, and this is again from what it resonates with me. I think he also finds a different liberation in each of the types of loves that he experiences. Right, the eternal, the liberation of knowing that Sarmadel and Livia will be there forever is liberating in the sense that he never has to worry about that love going away. But then the danger and the risk and the passion of the love that he has with Antoine liberates him and allows him to experience that quote unquote earthly love, that mortal love that is completely different from what he gets from the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's that added element with Antoine of him kind of thumbing his nose at the establishment when he's involved, because the hunts are very organized, structured thing. The king and the church and the local nobility, they're all involved in making this thing happen, and he's off hooking up with the Baron's son. So
with the Baron's,
there's a real like kind of mischief to it as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They're gallivanting.
Yeah, that's right. Gallivant in the Givaudan, right? That's what they got. That's what they're
swashbuckling. Yes.
That's right. I know we are now probably at about a little bit over an hour with just the technical difficulties, so we want to definitely respect your time in Melbourne, and we'll probably end the full episode now. Move on to the Oops-isode, and we can talk in a moment about what we want to do for the Oops-isode, which again is a shorter episode with just something that we want to poke at or target that we either didn't talk about or something expounding upon what we did talk about. But usually at this time, then, Cam, we end with something called Final Thoughts.
Indeed.
Like to hear about the final thoughts on the whiskey and final thoughts about the book. We'll go first and then end with you on your final thoughts on both of those items.
Yep.
So that we highlight your final thoughts as the final thoughts for the first episode. So final thoughts, Mark, first on the whiskey and then on the book.
Well, so for the whiskey, I am really glad that we revisited Starward
Yeah.
You know, we had Twofold 5 years ago,
Probably.
something like that. And at the time, we really didn't know what we were doing in terms of tasting. And I think that we missed a lot the first time around,
Clearly.
which makes me think that we need to go back and look at the first 2 seasons and probably go back and revisit some of those as well. I think that this whiskey is delightful. I love the fact that the balance is just right, even though they've blended a whiskey with a single malt and then aged it in wine barrels.
Right.
I mean, it's almost like it's threefold in a way because of the aging process that they're doing also. I think that it's surprising in some ways. It is delightful. It's got multiple layers of flavors going on at the same time. I think it's both. I think it's good, both neat and on the rocks. Yeah, I'm glad that we revisited it.
I would add to that. I'm glad we revisited. I think the taste is delicious. I think you've got that red fruit taste in there, and the ice brings that out even more so than neat.
Yeah,
and just a really, really good taste. How about your final thoughts on the Red Winter by our guest author?
Well, so let me start off by, and I do this often. I'll tell you about my preconceived notions, and then what it was that I found. So Stephen calls me up and he says, the algorithm is recommending this book, and I think that we absolutely have to do it because it's about France. Like, oh God, okay. No, you don't understand. It's the Beast of Gévaudan, and the only reason why I know what that is because of the movie Brotherhood of the Wolf. Right. And
Yeah.
And I go, well, I mean, okay, that was a cool movie. We can do that. but it was certainly not anything that I expected, and it wasn't what Stephen initially described, because he was kind of focused on the idea, like, you know, that it's either a French werewolf or it's a French wolf, but either way, it's French and it's got wolves, so we're doing it. I thought that the interweaving of some of the stories were very well done. I think that the characters are fantastic. I love the depth that they have and the growth arcs that they go through or don't go through. Samadel kind of seems like Samadel is always Samadel, but I think that even though we're talking about mainly characters who are immortal in one sense or another, that through this period of time, starting with the relationship with Antoine and moving forward into the second time that they go hunting for the beast, I think that there's a large character arc that happens for almost all of the characters. And I find that kind of stuff both compelling and delightful. And there's stuff that we haven't talked about that maybe we can think about for the oops episode. We didn't talk about there's lots of allusions to the idea that Sebastian is not just old, but very old, and he does not know how he got that way. That's certainly something that kept needling me a little bit, and I wanted to hear more about it and see if there was going to be more revealed. And then I loved the whole connection with Joan of Arc. I thought that was great.
We could do that for the oops episode.
Yeah. I thought that was very well done. You know, and the political structure that you created, both between the barony and the church, and kind of further out in the orbit, you know, the crown and the church, and then the connection with the various supernatural characters. I thought that was that was weaved into a very balanced tapestry, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book.
And I think for me, and I think this is what we talk about with some of the other authors that we have interviewed for the show recently, and Mark is right. You know, when I saw this recommended, I jumped on it, and part of that is the same type of geeking out that you did, Cam, with the monster histories, the lore. I love cultural folklore. I love the my whole mother's side is Norwegian, Swedish, Nordic countries. I love the lore around the trolls and the Vikings and all that kind of stuff. In France, this has always been something that has interested me from when I was a very young boy in high school, first exploring French language to making this part of my career. And so, yeah, those things jump out to me and become part of my world. And any author or artist, in your case too, that brings that to life, I think is brilliant. And I would love to bring this even more to my students when we do units on lore and magic and creatures and things like that. So when I do that, I'll make sure I loop you in on that and let you know what I'm doing from a professional standpoint. But what I love about this is and I mentioned this earlier, is the web of relationships that it has created.
I think it really makes it.
And I think a book speaks to people in different ways. And I think for me,
especially if you're on DMT.
Right. And I think for me, it reminds me of the relationships that I developed throughout my life, right? I obviously am not an immortal monster hunter.
I can't say the same.
As far as we know.
As far as we know, I'll let you know. But what you've done here for me as a reader is an exceptional reminder of the depth of the relationships that we have. And just to explore that has been a lot of fun for me through your writing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that very, very much. And we read lots of books. And I really, this one was really a fun and special read for me. Yep.
It was great.
So
what did you think of the Starward?
Now your final thoughts on the whiskey, and then give us a final thought from the author perspective of the Red Winter.
Well, the whiskey is very easy. I have enjoyed this very much. Starward, is the whiskey that I buy here, partly because it's a Melbourne brand, but also just because I think as someone who's not an exceptionally experienced whiskey drinker, like I don't know that much about the connoisseurship of whiskey, I guess you could say. It's a very accessible and smooth. It doesn't give me that kind of boozy feeling, which I think turns a lot of people off, especially dark spirits. I can drink it like this, as I'm discovering, or on ice, and I love it. So I absolutely, and I like Starward because they, as we were talking about before, they do different things every year, and there's always something new to try, and it's always incredible. So I absolutely loved the Starward. I'm really glad you guys chose it. And as far as the book goes, thank you both so much. I love your reactions are exactly what I want people to have for the book. It's yes, it's a story about a monster hunt, and yes, it's history, and it's a little bit kind of horror adjacent, and it's all of those things. But the relationships and the characters are what make the story, I think, as with any book. So whether it's genre fiction or literary fiction, if you don't identify with the characters in the story, you're not going to care about what's happening, and it's not enjoyable. And so I think what I've really enjoyed talking to you guys about is the character interactions and that kind of alternative history, and the people who the characters who kind of see behind that and why they're interesting. I think that's what I wanted to get across, and it obviously really landed with you guys, and I love that. So thank you very much.
It sure did.
Yeah.
We
Thank you for sharing the story with us.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that work with us and for sharing that the time with us tonight. We really appreciate you being on the show tonight, Cam.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thank you for staying up so late. I appreciate it. You guys are well past your bedtime now.
We love it. We love it.
I've got about three more hours till my bedtime.
Yeah. The
Okay,
problem with
fine.
Sarmadell over here is that he's up until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And in the summer, as a teacher, I have my summers, but during the regular school year, I got to go to bed early. But we loved having Cameron Sullivan on the show. Please make sure, dear listeners, that you pick up the Red Winter wherever you get your books. Please also make sure that you check out the audio version, which is pretty brilliant. Make sure you follow Beards Books and Bourbon all over the place. We are on all the socials. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter.
We're on all that stuff.
All that stuff. Check us out wherever you...
This platform, that platform,
That's right.
Upcast, Downcast, Incast, Outcast, MyCast, Yourcast.
Everywhere. Download our podcast wherever you consume your podcasts. And thank you, as always, for supporting the show. Please make sure you leave us some stars, some comments, some good juju.
Right.
And you know what? It doesn't really matter if you are being chased down by a large, hairy beast in the southern part of France.
You shouldn't call yourself that.
If you have a demon on the back of your shoulder, or if you
shouldn't call me that.
Lucky enough or unlucky enough to have a succubus in your world. I don't know where that's going to go.
Don't call my wife
Is that my
that.
job?
It's right. If you are not listening to Beards, Books, and Bourbon,
You're doing it wrong.
good night, everybody.
Good night.